A Venezuelan general convicted for trafficking cocaine into the U.S. Ecuador's most wanted criminal captured in an underground bunker. All of that and much more in this week's edition of Organized Crime News Weekly. Welcome back to Organized Crime News Weekly. This is the weekly show where we discuss the goings-on in the global criminal underworld. Before I start, I just want to remind everyone to please like, share, and subscribe so we can help grow this channel. On June 25th, in a New York courtroom, former Venezuelan General Hugo Carvajal pled guilty to charges that include conspiracy to import cocaine into the United States, as well as terrorism and weapons charges. This comes 1 week before his trial was due to start. Carvajal was a close ally of former Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez, and even participated in Chavez's attempted coup in 1992, before he eventually obtained power in the late 1990s. U.S. prosecutors allege that beginning around 1999, when Carvajal became the director of Venezuela's military intelligence agency, he started to engage in cocaine trafficking as one of the leaders of the Cartel de los Soles, or Cartel of the Suns. The Cartel of the Suns is an alleged cocaine trafficking organization that is alleged to be made up of members of Venezuela's military leadership. It's alleged that it was formed by former President Hugo Chavez to traffic cocaine into the United States as a weapon of war. And since Chavez's death in 2013, it's been rumored that his successor, Nicolas Maduro, has taken over the Cartel of the Suns. Its name stems from the fact that Venezuelan generals wear the insignia of a sun on their uniforms, and the Cartel of the Suns allegedly protects groups such as the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, or the FARC, a left-wing insurgent group in Colombia that financed its activities through cocaine trafficking. As part of this conspiracy to traffic cocaine into the U.S., the Cartel of the Suns allegedly collaborated with the FARC and is alleged to have protected them from drug seizures as well as supplying them with weapons and Venezuelan official documents. One of these shipments in 2006 saw 5.6 tons of cocaine shipped from Venezuela on a DC-9 plane with a U.S. registration number that was ultimately seized in Mexico. Ironically, in October 2012, Hugo Carvajal was appointed head of Venezuela's National Office Against Organized Crime and Financing of Terrorism. Carvajal was first arrested in 2014 on the island of Aruba on a U.S. arrest warrant, but was released a few days later after President Nicolas Maduro closed Venezuela's airspace in protest of his arrest. Despite this assistance from Maduro, Carvajal turned against him when in 2019 he released a video in support of Maduro opposition leader and interim Venezuelan President Juan Guaido. This led to Maduro expelling Carvajal from the armed forces and accusing him of treason. That same year, Carvajal was arrested in Spain at the request of the United States. After multiple appeals were denied, Carvajal was finally extradited to the United States in July of 2023 and initially pleaded not guilty. After pleading guilty this week, Carvajal faces 50 years to life imprisonment. It is believed by some that Carvajal might be willing to provide incriminating evidence against the Maduro regime as far as its ties to cocaine trafficking, election tampering, and espionage committed within the United States. Carvajal is said to also possess information on Maduro's involvement with Iran, FARC, and the notorious Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua. So it remains to be seen if Carvajal will eventually provide information that could further incriminate Maduro in criminal activity. The Maduro regime is said to heavily rely on illicit economies such as cocaine trafficking and oil smuggling to prop up the government in wake of all the sanctions placed on it by countries such as the United States. Carvajal definitely could provide more details on these alleged misdeeds of the Maduro regime, but that remains to be seen. On June 18th, a shooting occurred in the garden of a private hospital in Istanbul, Turkey. Killed in the shooting was a man named Osman Beshi, who was hit by 9 bullets. Beshi had been receiving treatment at the hospital and was accompanied by his friend Hassan O. After the shooting, Hassan fired on the attackers with his gun as they fled the scene. Hassan was subsequently arrested by the police and charged with attempted wounding and gun charges. It has now come out that the murdered man Beshi, at the time of his death, was involved in a lawsuit against his mother over a $90 million inheritance, and that the notorious Dalton gang became aware of this. The Dalton gang is a very prominent gang in Turkey that is heavily involved in extortion, heroin trafficking, arms trafficking, as well as human trafficking. And the group has managed to even expand outside of Turkey into other countries, most prominently Greece and Italy. Just last year, their leader, Boris Boyan, was arrested in Italy. And in recent years, they've terrorized many communities throughout Istanbul with extortion campaigns carried out against local business owners, with gunmen hired by the Dalton gang recording videos of themselves opening fire on storefronts. Osman Beshi, the murdered man, received numerous calls from alleged members of the Dalton gang after they became aware of this lucrative inheritance he was to receive. The Daltons demanded $15 million from him, but Beshi refused despite these threats. After the shooting, 2 unidentified men who are alleged to have carried out the shooting were arrested in the city of Edirne in Turkey while attempting to flee the country. They have since been brought back to Istanbul for questioning. But the Dalton gang continues to wreak havoc throughout Turkey, and the Dalton gang is definitely one to watch out for as they gain power in Turkey and all across the Mediterranean region of Europe. This past week, Indian gangster Lawrence Bishnoi's gang claimed responsibility for the shooting death of Brampton, Ontario businessman MP Danoa, which occurred last week outside an automotive shop. This murder occurred allegedly due to Danoa's refusal to pay protection money to the Bishnoi gang as part of an extortion scheme. Sources allege that the murder was supervised by Bishnoi's partner, Goldie Brar, who has become notorious in the last couple years, particularly for the murder of popular Punjabi rapper Sindhu Moosewala, which occurred back in 2022. The Bishnoi gang's complicity in this murder extortion plot came to light when one of the gang's top men, Rohit Godara, claimed responsibility in a Facebook posting stating that the gang was attempting to extort Danoa because he, quote, made money through a lot of wrong things. South Asian communities all throughout Canada, particularly provinces of Ontario, British Columbia, and Alberta, have seen a great uptick recently in cases of protection money being demanded by Indian gangsters based overseas. The Lawrence Bishnoi gang is the most prominent example of these Indian extortion gangs. Bishnoi is currently locked up in jail back in India, but despite that, he has managed to maintain control over a criminal empire that operates not just in India, but is spread across the world, including to the United States and Canada. The Bishnoi gang is said to have over 700 members, based all across the world, with Canada being one of the prime areas that it has influence in. This murder that occurred this past week is the second murder in the last month in the province of Ontario that the Bishnoi gang has claimed responsibility for. The first was the May killing of Mississauga insurance broker Harjeet Dada, who had allegedly refused demands by the Bishnoi gang for $500,000. Dada was accused by the Bishnoi gang of sheltering the killer of one of their allies, as well as financing Arsh Dalla, a leader of the Khalistani movement, who is considered a terrorist by the Indian government. The Khalistani movement is a movement made up of Sikh nationalists who look to create a Sikh state separate from India, and the Indian government has greatly resisted this movement. Lawrence Bishnoi is an avowed Hindu nationalist. The government of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has even been rumored to utilize Bishnoi's gang to target Khalistani activists across the world, including in Canada, where murders of Khalistani activists have been linked to members of Lawrence Bishnoi's gang. But since Dada's killing last month, 2 men have been arrested for the murder. Bishnoi gang continues to terrorize business owners across the world. Some sources say with the complicity of the Indian government, but I'm sure this is not the last case of a South Asian business owner in Canada being targeted by the Bishnoi gang, as they have been relentless in expanding throughout the country and possibly even extending their reach further into the United States. After a 17-month manhunt, Jose Adolfo Macias Villamar, better known as Fito, Ecuador's most wanted man and the leader of its largest gang, Los Choneros, was rearrested by Ecuadorian soldiers in the city of Manta. He was discovered to have been hiding in an underground bunker in a luxurious house located in the city center. This contradicts rumors that Fito had fled Ecuador and possibly relocated to another country, particularly Argentina. Fito escaped from Ecuador's literal penitentiary back in January of 2024, where he had already served 12 years of a 34-year prison sentence for various charges, including drug trafficking. This was his second escape from prison, as he had previously escaped from incarceration back in February of 2013, along with 17 other members of Los Choneros, before being recaptured just 3 months later. Fito took over Los Choneros in 2020 after the murder of its previous leader, Jorge Luis Zambrano, and he quickly established close links with the Sinaloa cartel. However, Zambrano's death led to a rupture of Los Choneros, with many splinter groups forming that opposed Fito's leadership. Fito exercised great power over the internal control of the literal penitentiary, which allowed him to escape the prison undetected last year. His escape in 2024 ignited levels of gang violence in Ecuador that had previously been unheard of, which included scores of attacks on civilians and police, multiple bombings, and even the hostage-taking of a news station in the middle of a broadcast. And this explosion of gang violence in Ecuador is partly due to the fact that Ecuador has become the top departure point for cocaine heading onto Europe, particularly with the port of Guayaquil. And these gangs are looking to obtain the vast profits that are to be made from transporting the cocaine from countries such as Colombia to Ecuadorian ports, where they are then moved on to Europe by other traffickers, particularly ones from Albania. But this explosion of violence in the immediate aftermath of Fito's escape led to President Daniel Noboa declaring a national state of emergency, which has seen police and military operations against the Ecuadorian gangs increase dramatically to try to counteract the influence of the gangs, but instead it has seen an uptick in violence across the country. Just this past April, Fito was indicted by the U.S. Attorney's Office of the Eastern District of New York with 7 charges that include conspiracy to traffic cocaine and arms trafficking. Ecuador is said to have already initiated proceedings to have Fito extradited to the United States. So the future for Fito looks very bleak, as he potentially faces spending the rest of his life behind bars in the United States. This also comes at a time when it's said that Los Choneros is said to be quickly losing ground to other gangs, most notably its arch-rival Los Lobos. And Fito's arrest has definitely caused a seismic shift in the Ecuadorian underworld as the violence continues to escalate and Ecuador becomes an even more key component of the international cocaine trade. All right, that's going to do it for this week's edition of Organized Crime News Weekly. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll be back next week to report on more stories concerning the global criminal underworld. Thank you so much for tuning in.